All right, welcome back, scholars. There's been a half a semester buildup to the High Renaissance, and here we are today. So take good note. High Renaissance, unlike everything else that we've looked at, where we've sort of seen 15th century-ish, Gothic period, 12th century-ish, because it depends on where you are, which particular thing you're talking about. Whereas the High Renaissance, certainly in the South, there's really hard dates. So 1490 to 1520, this is the pinnacle of the High Renaissance. We're only going to look at three artists today, kind of the major rock stars, because they are the masters in a period of masters. And I think these are the ones that you'll need to know the most. As we go through the later periods, you'll start to see people kind of copying Raphael, copying Michelangelo, copying Da Vinci. So if you know what their style is, what their work looked like, sort of those key points of mastery from them, the rest of this should be make a little bit more sense. Humanism and classicism are big isms for this High Renaissance. We've had a 200-year buildup on how to artistically express these concepts. Now we've mastered it. I'm going to throw the word mastered and perfection around so much today you're going to be tired of it, but those really are kind of the two adjectives of the era. Perfection in composition, perfection in observation, mastery of portraying the human figure, the human form. This is sort of imitation of nature, showing you exactly what is there. But also there's a bit of an idealism in that we look at what is the perfect version of the human form. What is the perfect face? What is the perfect proportion? We are looking at that. We've got mastery of linear and atmospheric perspective. So that illusion of three-dimensional depth on a 2D canvas from that linear perspective or vanishing point perspective, as well as the atmospheric perspective, adding that sort of mistiness into the distance. We're also harkening back to classical proportions of the Greeks and Romans. The three big guys, we've got Raphael. His real name was Raphael Sanzio, and he was from Italian, da is from Urbino. He was the master of composition, a really, really complex composition with tons of different figures, buildings, clouds, holy hosts of angels and God, and it doesn't matter how much stuff you want to put into a composition, Raphael could make it look clean and smooth and easy to read and perfectly balanced. He was the master of complex composition. And so from this point up until literally today, a half an hour ago, some artist somewhere is referring back to Raphael's work to understand how to compose and balance a complex design. Here you've got their whole names just for your information, but you can notice how sometimes they are super vague. So you've got like Leonardo da Vinci, like Leonardo from the town of Vinci, super vague. Also, I hope noticing here you see the first two guys. Raphael was a young man. He died when he was like 37. He never made it to middle age. He was a young man when he died in 1520. Leonardo da Vinci, he was a fairly old man for the period. Almost made it to 70. What are we, 68, 67? He also died in 1519. So we've kind of got that like day the music died sort of situation. When we lost two of our heavy-hitting Renaissance masters, I will also point out the master architect of the period, Bramante. He was dead by 1520 as well. So you've lost sort of 75% of your super hit rock stars of the stylistic era. It's over in 1520. With the death of Raphael, with Da Vinci having died the previous year, with Bramante being dead, we've lost too many rock stars to really consider it their era anymore. So what happens after that? Well, Michelangelo Buonarroti from Lodovico, he, as you can see, lived well past that 1520 marker. He didn't retire. He actually becomes a major master of the next movement, which is Mannerism. It's a very different stylistic movement. So Michelangelo produces a lot of mastery in the High Renaissance. He also becomes a major player in the next movement. So he's a master of two stylistic movements, the High Renaissance and Mannerism. So Michelangelo, he was a master of both. And part of that, which is quite interesting because Mannerism does not go for perfection of figure, and he changes his style completely during that time. I mean, you can still tell it's a Michelangelo. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're going to sort of give examples today, just a few examples of work that support these statements of their mastery, that Raphael was a master of complex composition, that Leonardo da Vinci was a master of observation and drawing. Wow, that was super British of me. Drawing. Michelangelo, he was the master of figure and human form. So before the Renaissance, the word create was only used for God. Artists make things. The term create began to be used for artists in the Renaissance. We have Giorgio Vasari to thank for a lot of our terms that we have for this period, including using the word create. He's also the one who called it the Rinascite, the rebirth, the Renaissance. He was a massive fanboy of Michelangelo and other major Renaissance artists, but we owe him a great deal for what we know about this period. The High Renaissance was a lot more than just these three guys, but if we're doing a highlights reel, it's this. So I need you to understand these as sort of the epitome of High Renaissance art. All right, so Leonardo da Vinci. Virgin of the Rocks. We looked at this piece in our art toolkit in the very first week. You remember that he did 2 versions of this exact piece, Virgin of the Rocks. This is the earlier one, 1483. You can see that it's the warmer toned one if you're trying to remember that warm versus cool. Both of them count as Renaissance because they hit 25 years apart in that 30-year period. This is 1483. That comes before our 1490. But you remember from our last lecture before the midterm, the Great Exchange, where the Southerners got that oil painting technology, the oil paint, came in the 1470s. So Da Vinci had access to these things. Let's look at composition. Very high Renaissance. You've got that equilateral triangle. I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor here, but if you look at the apex of it being the Virgin Mary there, come down to the baby Jesus, and then slide over to the angel and John the Baptist, you've got a very triangular composition of the figures. Squares, circles, equilateral triangles, these sort of perfect stable shapes are very high Renaissance. Notice how we have a comfortable foreground up here where we've got some space between us and the main figures or action. You've got these interlocking gestures between each figure to sort of keep you in this triangular loop and showing you where that sort of main focal action is. Notice that our landscape, certainly in the foreground here, these are all like perfect botanical specimens. You could identify the species based on the details that he's given us here. So again, imitating nature. Notice that we've kind of got this background that is very nature, but it's got almost an extreme atmospheric perspective. Going into the distance, it gets grayer and mistier and less defined, but to an extreme degree. This sort of like spooky, misty fog machine action is called sfumato. That was one of our terms in the art toolkit. When you refer to sfumato, you are referring to Da Vinci and the way that he did this like atmospheric perspective on steroids. So you've got this ultra hazy, magical kind of fog machine thing going on. That is Da Vinci. So sfumato, think Da Vinci. Anybody who's doing sfumato to create that sort of misty fog machine look is nodding to Da Vinci with what he's doing. So curvilinear lines everywhere. Notice how these rocks aren't like jagged. They've got roundiness to them. We've got nice sort of round, curvy lines everywhere, both in the figures and the background. The details are sort of very Renaissance. Notice the anatomy of the figures and things. Like we've got a certain level of extreme detail and perfection in there, right down to sort of the children. Notice how they aren't homunculus theory. They're actually like fat baby looking babies, not weird middle-aged men looking babies. We've got an anatomical accuracy. We've got botanical accuracy with our plants that are in here. He really understood form. The Mona Lisa, we've got that triangular composition. And sfumato, look at that hazy, misty, magical fog machine kind of background behind her. That doesn't look like anywhere that I could, like it's a mythical I mean, hellscape is probably the wrong word, but it's a magical misty place. So that's part of that sfumato misty hazy background. Let's look at also curvilinear. We've got the curvy sort of rocks, and we've got the sort of curvy shapes of her body. Remember our art toolkit with Humbert de Superville, how her lips and her eyes both kind of do that flip, turn upward, lift at the edges. So we've also got this kind of compromise between the two qualities of an individual where you can recognize the person because it looks like them versus the perfect ideal. We're going to go through what an ideal high Italian Renaissance beauty looks like in a minute. But she is kind of this great midpoint where you've got these sort of recognizable individual features that don't just sort of fit into the mathematically perfect female face. He's done two great bog standard Italian Renaissance beauties for his female faces, whereas the Mona Lisa, we get a slightly different approach to the jaw. She's certainly got the cheekbones, but the eyes and the nose, he's given us kind of this compromise. There's like some tension between the individual and the perfect ideal. Gaze. She is staring right at us. It is very engaging. That is very unusual for a portrait. So I think that is the part of this that makes it such a famous piece as far as that Mona Lisa smile. I think it's quite obvious that she's smiling if you look at her. People weren't into toothy grins back in the day for any reason. And the fact that she's staring right back at us is, I think, also quite shocking, especially for this period. So she's famous because of her unusual qualities as an individual portrait. Why doesn't she have eyebrows? Well, I've got one theory for you. There's many. My mother is a portrait artist, and she will tell you if like hair happens last, like you can block it in, but you can't like do hair first and then put skin on because then your hair is under your skin and it won't look right. So things that are in front of other things are done last. So you put the eyebrows on as one of the last things you do when finishing a face. So if he was still fussing with the details of her facial features or her skin or any other thing, then he would not have put her eyebrows on. I mean, I think she does have a bit of eyebrow going on there, so perhaps she just didn't have much in the way of eyebrows to speak of, but it also could indicate that he just simply wasn't finished yet. And that's valid because this woman's husband who commissioned this portrait never got it. He took it with him when he went to France. So, you know, if it was done, then he would have completed it then. Let's look at some of his drawing. We've got this set of grotesques. Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks. We've got a lot of his notebooks, his sketches, his notes. He's quite famous for writing, mirror writing backwards. He was quite the character in a lot of ways. I think this is one of those examples of how he really studied accentuating the uniqueness and the individuality of people. You can see here, he's not going for idealism. He is accentuating those unique individualistic attributes that people have. So this is how he can master recognizing those parts of somebody's individual look that makes them look like them. And that is absolutely essential to a portrait because people want to be more beautiful than they actually are. People want you to sort of face tune and correct when you're painting a portrait. So he would have had to mix in the ideal beauty moments with the individual characteristics that made someone recognizable. So for him to be able to really understand what makes somebody look like themselves via caricature, he could master making you look as beautiful as possible while still looking like you. And these sorts of exercises that show how to accentuate those things about a person's features, I think are fantastic examples of how he really could understand what makes someone look unique. Versus some of his cookie cutter ideal Italian Renaissance beauties. And here we have a Virgin Mary that is an exact Italian high Renaissance beauty of the era. You notice here, even with this close-up portrait, we've got this sfumato about it, right? There's a misty, hazy softness to his work. This piece, we've got that oval face where we've got the sort of pointed chin down at the bottom and then like the nice rounded forehead. So an oval face, like an upside down teardrop. High cheekbones. You've got these really high appley cheekbones going on. A long, very slender nose. Also, hooded eyes. If anybody follows makeup tutorials, that's something people quote fix these days. Heavy lidded eyes were very much part of that high Renaissance beauty. And that is just this sort of upper part. You've got the lid that physically goes over the eyeball when you open and close your eyes. And then you've got this upper lid, which is like the rest of the eye socket. So making this look very plump and fatty. Almost makes you look sleepy. Thin lips, tiny lips. Not necessarily in the width, but the actual visible lip. So very opposite of what we consider ideal beauty standards today, where big pouty lips is a thing that people overdraw their lips and things to try to make them look bigger. Not what we're after here. Those thin, small lips. So if you look at the Mona Lisa now, we've got a mix of that individual versus the ideal. So oval face, hers is a lot more square, right? I mean, she's got that tiny little chin, but she's got quite a square face, which means that she must have had a very square face in life. She's got high cheekbones. She's got a long, slender nose. She's got very heavy upper lids to her eyes. She's got very thin lips. So she's falling into that Italian Renaissance beauty standard, while still having been adjusted a bit to make it identifiable. And I think the biggest thing that we can see deviating from that perfect Italian Renaissance beauty is the face shape overall, having sort of a heavier chin. Let's talk about Raphael. School of Athens. We've looked at this piece like 20 times already. It's my go-to for perfect composition. Every single art toolkit element that we studied is executed here perfectly. In the center, you see we've got Plato versus Aristotle. We've got perfect single vanishing point perspective. We've talked about that. We've talked about the complementary colors that sort of signal the narrative. We've talked about how it's balanced point of view. We enter comfortably. We've got a foreground. We've got our main event. We've got our background vanishing into open blue sky. We've got a huge crowd of people, but it certainly doesn't feel crowded. We've got the past greats here of Athens, and we're invited to take part in the genius of their time. So the School of Athens here gives credit to the ancients for the human knowledge. But it's also about the artists of the high Renaissance recognizing the greatness of the past. All the big four, Michelangelo, Raphael, Bramante, and Da Vinci, are written into the classical world here. So slump forward here, we've got Heraclitus. That is actually a portrait of Michelangelo. So we've also got the big guy here, Plato, the grandfather of them all. That's a portrait of Leonardo da Vinci. By the way, this Heraclitus to the painting later as a later addition. It's not in the initial sketches. These two knew each other quite well, Michelangelo and Raphael. So meanwhile, while Raphael was painting this in the library at the Vatican, Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel. So let's look at Plato. He is the great teacher of Aristotle. He is also the granddaddy of the High Renaissance. So here he is with the face of Leonardo da Vinci. Over here, Raphael, once again, just giving himself the little peeking out of the corner self-portrait that we've seen in so many other works in that lead up to the High Renaissance. So he put himself at the edge of the fresco as a character looking out at us, making that eye contact. Here we've got Michelangelo, late addition, but I think probably is a really good example of Michelangelo as a person too. Like he seems like kind of a grump who's not paying attention to anybody, even though he's in a rather social situation. We see how Michelangelo does himself in self-portraits as we go along over the next couple weeks. He seems like he was kind of a killjoy. Back to the School of Athens as a whole. This represents the perfection of human knowledge. This is in the Pope's library. So I think it's a fitting place for this fresco, being sort of the representation of the greatest of human knowledge. On the other side, so you can see here, it's like a barrel vault ceiling where we've kind of got that like half a cylinder going on here in our rounded archway. So down the other end of the barrel vault, you're going to have a facing painting, and that is Raphael's same year, Disputation of the Divine Sacrament. So we've got human knowledge and the nods towards what we have achieved as the human race on one end of the library, and then we have our divine knowledge represented on the other end of the room. So, two levels of existence. You can see that we've got sort of double vanishing point perspective going on here. Look at how many people, just count the crowd here and how much we got going on. And again, Raphael, master of making a busy scene actually look quite clean and well organized. So you've got the vanishing point perspective here. You could follow the orthogonals with a ruler to see that our vanishing point is sort of right here behind the altar with the Holy Sacrament. And then you can see we've got that vanishing point perspective happening above us as well. And that secondary vanishing point is right above the first. Here we also have some work towards a vanishing point on a third tier that we are coming to. So we've got the altar with the Holy Sacrament being our earthly vanishing point. The clouds are foreshortened as a floor that we're looking underneath, and the clouds are also little cherub babies. So all of these are figures with faces and expressions, and there's so many human figures here. If you look up here in these clouds are also cherub figures. So many human figures here. This should be such a busy, crowded, difficult to get your eye through composition if it weren't Raphael. But everything is so neatly balanced and organized that it's quite easy to read. Doesn't feel cramped at all. Everybody's having quite a nice time. It's just this incredibly complex composition that he makes it look easy. And that is why you're going to start to sort of recognize Raphael in many of our later artists when they're stuck with a crowd that they've got to depict. They look to him for organization. Sometimes there'll be an homage to it, and other times it will be sort of a screw you, Raphael kind of moment where you kind of recognize where they took exactly his composition and then twisted it a little bit. So you can tell that they studied him. Whether or not they're happy about it or not is something else to be seen. Also, look at these cherubs holding on to the rays of light as well. So many figures in this composition. It boggles the mind, but it's clean, it's balanced, it's organized, it's easy to read because Raphael is great. Michelangelo, sorry about my pointer there. We've got this master of figure. What we have here is also quite a complicated composition if you think about it from a logistical perspective. So you've got a full-sized female figure and male figure. One is clothed, one is nude. One is alive, one is dead. That's a lot to pack into a sculpture. So he's gone for a triangular composition. It's again with Mary being the apex, and then we come down that her seat on the rocks here and the folds of her cloth actually make up the base of the sculpture. So she creates this wide base with her robes, and remember this is made of stone, so it's got to be bottom heavy, so not to be tippy. He's accomplished that logistically, but also made it quite beautiful of form in that triangular composition as well. Remember that marble is a subtractive medium, which means you chip into it, and if you go too far, there is no patching it back. So oval face, once again, we've got our Italian high Renaissance ideal. We've got this oval face with the sort of thin chin. We've got the high cheekbones. We've got these sort of hooded, thick upper lids. Even though she's looking down, you can see her lower lid as well. We've still got that sort of bump of like a nice, soft, heavy upper lid. We've got a long, slim nose. We got thin lips. Everything about an ideal Renaissance beauty. But the level of detail in this piece is just staggering for a marble statue. Let's have a look at the hand of Christ here. Jesus, you've got the veins running under his skin. You've got the hole from the nail as he's been pulled off the cross, crucified. You've got the little ridges in his fingers. The cuticle on his fingernail is actually like a secondary ridge. These are so incredibly well detailed. And to create that difference in those contrasts, to put a full-size adult male nude corpse on top of a clothed female figure who's very much alive in the same stone, in the same composition. He's managed it. I mean, this is an incredible piece for its contrasts, and that's part of what makes it so striking. Michelangelo's David. That'd be him over there on the left. I've thrown one of our key terms up here, contrapposto. Contrapposto is, again, that way that you stand with all of your weight on one leg. So you got the hip kind of popped out here because you've got all your weight on one leg. That's called standing contrapposto. Let's take a moment of David is 14 feet high. He is twice as tall as I mean, 7 foot tall is not a normal man. He's real big. I've got this great image from conservation here where you can see this woman on a scaffold. The amount of upscaling that had to happen while this stayed anatomically and figuratively accurate is incredible. He also studied classical sculpture. I have the Apollo Belvedere over here on the right. It is not huge. It's like people-sized. It's life-sized. But you can notice that this piece, the Apollo Belvedere, is a Roman marble sculpture. It's from the 2nd century, and it's a copy of a 4th century BC Greek sculpture. So this thing is like a copy of a 600-year-old statue when it was made, and then Michelangelo gets inspired and uses it, more than 1,000 years later. It's quite interesting that one sculpture is so influential over the years and over the civilizations. So the Apollo Belvedere here, you can see contrapposto position. That arm would have been resting down by his hip like Michelangelo does. He's got the other arm out. Obviously here we've got it bent, but we've very much got a very similar overall figure here. The Apollo Belvedere is an important piece because it was discovered during this time. So archaeology, not a new thing. People talk about how the arms are too long and the hands are too big and the feet are too big. And then the counter argument is David was supposed to be a youth. And one thing about teenagers or pubescent youths is their arms and hands and feet are too big because they grow faster than the rest of your torso height. So he's probably perfectly proportioned for being like a mid to late teen. Whether or not you can get like the muscle definition of a 30-year-old is a different question. But I think you can see here, certainly with the figurative forms, some of his inspiration, yet some of it is very much specifically High Renaissance. Let's have a look at some more of Michelangelo's male figures. We've got the Creation of Adam here in the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Meanwhile, so this is 1511. Raphael was doing the library in 1510. They'd have been hanging out together. So we've got Creation of Adam. Neoplatonic thought is a way that classicism started to become Catholic-ified. So Plato, you saw him in the School of Athens with Raphael, kind of getting mixed. Plato's theories from the ancient Greek are starting to get mixed with Christian theology added to sort of update it. So this idea that human beings have a spark of divinity in them, this is a great piece that kind of represents Neoplatonic thought. That you've got Adam in the Sistine ceiling. Adam's just a lump of stupid dead clay until God, on the right here with that energy, comes in and touches him, literally, with his finger there, with a spark of the divine. So each of us has a little bit of God in us. All of us are a little bit divine. You can see from the first half of this term that if you were to say that we're all a little bit like God, that'd have probably gotten you burned at the stake a few hundred years earlier. That would not have been cool with the Gothics, right? Keep yourself down in that mud. So fear God, be afraid of him, and judgment was more where we were. And now kind of elevating man to be divine, or at least having a spark of divinity in us, that we've all got that spark of God, which makes us special and creative and godlike and magical in our abilities to reach new heights. It makes us different from every other creature on earth. That's this Neoplatonic thought. This is like Plato's idea about all of us being godlike, or that the gods are modeled after us rather than vice versa, getting updated into that Christian theology. So each of us having that spark of divinity in our creation. So yeah, I think that should be a good set of solid pieces. We have critiqued this piece many times. You can see the color with the cool versus warm. We've got the simple figure versus very complex composition of figure here. We've got the static versus the movement. We got a lot going on here that we've already discussed ad nauseum. So I am going to cut it there.